who is Kieran? Kieran is a curly-headed f***wit from Scotland, half Hobbit, half McHucknall, who now lives in the Netherlands. I like the outdoors, used to do a bit of climbing, do a lot of hiking, that kind of thing. But yeah, for me, my main hobby, main passion is carp angling. You ever heard a Scotsman trying to say purple burglar alarm?
No.
Just can't do it. Purple burglar alarm.
Is that actually a real thing?
That's a real thing, yeah. It's just so hard for Scottish people. I don't know if it's a combination of like R's and L's together. Like, you know, you've got that name in English, in English. Tend to get a lot of English people called Carl, like Carl and Alex, right? Scottish people can't say the name Carl because it just comes out as Carol, you know, like a Christmas carol, or the female name Carol. You just can't say it any differently. Like a girl, Carol, can't do it. So I guess you wouldn't really expect carp angling to come from a Scottish boy like myself. We don't have many carp up there. The weather's generally cold, it's not the ideal climate for carp, and they tend to stay really, really small. For that reason, we've got a lot of pike anglers. Game fishing's big in Scotland, you know, salmon, that kind of stuff. We're also really big in our sea fishing, but for carp angling, you're probably lucky if there's 200 of us across the entire country. So it's kind of weird that I got into it, but I had an English cousin. He got into his carp fishing at a young age, and I guess I kind of wanted to emulate that. So yeah, I went looking for some carp. Struggled to find them for a long time, but it's one of those things. Once you're in the scene and you start to get to know a few people, you start to learn a little bit more. I was lucky enough to have a coarse fishery within driving distance from my house where my parents would drop me off. But in there was carp up to a whopping 14 pounds. I remember that being the big one back then. So really anything over 10 pounds, any double figure fish, that was a really impressive carp for me growing up. It took me years and years to catch fish of that size, and it took me even longer, of course, to catch my first 20 pounder. And for a long time, I considered that a fish of a lifetime. Now you're a wee stunner, aren't you? You know, there's something magical about catching a Scottish homegrown carp. But what we have up here is actually really fragile. The number of carp anglers is growing, and with that the demand for commercial fisheries is as well. And my fear is that fishery owners will be tempted to stock instant big carp up here. Now it's easily done. If you were to buy a 6 summer fish from England, it would weigh anywhere between 25 and 30 pounds. And if that's stocked into a lock up here, it's instantly one of the big ones. Now that might float the boat for some people, but to me, that's just manufactured and there is no magic. So I really hope we can hold on to fishing like this for as long as possible. So up here we don't have any linear fisheries. We have lochs like this that are stocked by the Scottish Carp Group. They're moderate head of fish in here, but a lot of places have really, really low stock. So if you're a beginner, you're really thrown in the deep end here. Now a lot of lochs, they're big, there's only a handful of carp in them, so you can go months and months without seeing anything. It can be pretty demoralising for a beginner. But there's the odd few that get through it. You know, they put in the effort and they really persist. And they're the ones that end up being carp anglers for life. We like that there's nothing contrived up here. There's no commercial build up here, and we want to keep it that way. If you want to go and fish linear, you go down south and you fish linear. You don't do it up here. So if 30 and 40 pounders were brought up from down south and stocked into little ponds up here, that magic would soon die. We want to keep it the way it is.
The term big carp, it can come across a little bit snobby, a little bit elitist, but I think for me personally, it isn't. It's not about catching the biggest carp or catching a bigger one than your mate, or it's a mindset and an attitude towards fishing, and I think it's about trying to pit your wits against those ones that are a little bit special and a little bit different. And I think Kieran's angling, especially in Scotland, and now obviously in Europe, but it epitomises that for me. Some of the lengths that he's gone through to catch some of these wild old Scottish carp of 20 pounds, which a fish of a lifetime, some of them, you know, they really are. You've got the predation, you've got everything else up in Scotland, which makes it super, super tricky for these carp to get to those sort of sizes. And he's out there, yeah, rain or shine, trying to make it happen. And I think for me as well, like when you look at Kieran and you read some of his pieces in carpology, he's an exceptional writer, but it kind of takes you back to a time for me where when I was younger reading little bits, I'm not old now, but when I was younger reading bits, like when carp were considered like impossible to catch or like mythical creatures. And I think for me, yeah, his angling kind of harks back to that, and yeah, makes him a really, really interesting guy.
So it might look like I'm pulling out all the stereotypes, and I am, to be honest. I miss this stuff, and when I'm over in the Netherlands I can't get it. So when I'm here, of course, this is what I'm going to do. Haggis, it's a mix of oats, spices, and all the hearty meat that's left over from the animal. Sustainable, it's proper sustainable, you know, it's zero waste in this. And it's delicious. Breakfast of champions is this. Oop, just dropped it all on myself. And we have the Scottish Carp group up here, and they're a little bit like the English Carp Society. They lease a couple of waters and keep them moderately stocked. And to be honest, without them there would be very, very little carp fishing up here. We're on one of their waters right now. Currently they have 5, but this is Kinghorn Loch. It's about 30 acres and we've got carp up to 30 pounds in here. Now this kind of fishing just would not exist in Scotland if it wasn't for the Scottish Carp group. Well, the weather's rolled in, that's for sure. The wind swung round, it's now blowing in from the northwest. It is pretty cold, but what can we expect for November, right? It is night bites on here generally, so if it's going to happen in the dark. Who knows? That's just fishing, right? Well, would you look at that? I think we can say that that was against the odds. We've had northerlies, we've had easterlies, we've had a freezing cold rain, but it all came good in the end. Early hours of this morning, this one ripped off, and yeah, we've been rewarded with a lovely, lovely mid-November Scottish carp. I've only been back in Scotland twice this year, and I've been lucky enough to catch on both occasions. I've got to say I'm really, really over the moon with this. The weights are relevant, especially when they look like that. Let's get her back. So match fishing's quite big in Scotland, but if you want to go for anything a little bit bigger, you know, specimen-sized carp, there's not a lot of choice. You know, we have these low stock lochs where there's only a handful of carp in them. You know, they're usually quite old. You know, they've been there since the 1970s, that kind of thing. If you want to go after that, then you know you're in for a long old slog. So I got into that at quite a young age. When I was in my early teens, I started going on these low stock venues, you know. I cut my teeth on one or two, and after a few years I started looking, you know, every year looking for something a little bit bigger, a little bit harder, a bigger challenge, that kind of thing. I fished some canals, some big lochs, that kind of thing, and then eventually I heard about this fish called paw print. Now at the time, that fish was Scotland's first 30-pound mirror. I believe it was also the second biggest fish in the country back then. And I found out about it, I knew where it was, but it was still another few years before I really got onto there. But one year I just decided, you know, I want a piece of that, you know, try for something really, really quite special, you know. And that's how that campaign came about, really. Well, the first year, I really struggled on there, actually. The loch is renowned for its shoals of big, big bream. And I started a baiting campaign in the spring, and I just got breamed out every single night up until about July. And we're talking a lot of bream here. You get the rods in, as soon as it got dark, you would just struggle to keep all 3 rods in the water. Often it would come to about 2 in the morning, I'd just wind all the rods in, leave them against the brolly just to get some sleep. It was absolutely horrendous. And on the carp front, I was really, really quite struggling actually. So I stuck it out for the summer, came into the first autumn, and I ended up getting flooded out one night. I woke up, the river beside the loch had flooded in. I woke up with the water under my bed chair, rucksack in the water, all that kind of stuff, you know. And I just had to get out of there in a hurry. I ended up having to wade out, pick the rods off bank sticks that were about 3 foot under the water. Got everything on the barrow. I had to get back across the bridge with the water rushing against one side of the barrow and trying to sweep the whole lot away. I just got home after that a broken man, you know. So I took a winter, I had to recover. When it came to the next again year, I was back and I was ready to face it again. Now that ended up being a bit of a strange year. It was 2020, COVID happened, and fishing was kind of knocked on the head for the first part of the spring. But as soon as we were allowed to get out fishing again, I got myself back down to the loch. I'd been baiting a spot the year before that produced a lot of bream, but I knew that this was a spot that the carp liked to be in as well. I had seen a few there, but I wasn't able to identify any of them as being paw print, this big mirror, you know. So I started baiting that again, and I could notice the spot getting firmer and firmer over the weeks. As it came up to the June new moon, I felt that spot was really, really ready and primed to be fishing on. So I gave it one final bait, got myself down there, got myself set up. I had to wade across onto an island to reach this spot, I'll have you know. You could hit it from the bank, but it was about a 100-yard cast, and I didn't feel the line lay was very good. I think that was where I was getting it wrong the year before. So I ended up wading out onto this island where I could just flick the rod out down the edge, you know, droop the fluorocarbon back up the marginal shelf and, you know, get it all sitting lovely. It took me one night after that. I remember waking up to this screaming run, and after a bit of an epic battle, I ended up with this colossal Scottish mirror carp in the net. I remember just standing there in the water, head back, rain pattering down on my face, and just the elation and relief of finally getting this fish in the net. 18 months in the making, first bite from a carp, and lo and behold, it was that one. So I got the net staked out, gave my dad a call. It was Father's Day, so that's a pretty good Father's Day present, isn't it? I gave my dad a call, and he came down with the family in tow, and we just had a bit of a gathering on the bank where we got the pictures, weighed this fish. I wasn't expecting it to be as big as it was actually. If it had gone something like 28 pounds, I would have been delighted as well. But actually it was about 6 pounds heavier than anything it'd ever done before. So it made it Scotland's second biggest carp overall. We do have a big 40-pound common, but it made it Scotland's biggest mirror carp, 35 pounds 14 ounces. So that capture of paw print shouldn't actually have happened. That year I was supposed to be moving to the Netherlands, and due to COVID that all got delayed. My original plan was to move in the beginning of June, and I ended up catching paw print on June 21st or something like that. So because of the delay, I ended up moving to the Netherlands in September. The reason for that being that I'd met a Dutch girl, and we'd been in a bit of a long distance relationship for a while. It was time that I moved over and we started living a life together. Now, carp fishing wise, moving to the Netherlands was a bit of a shock. Of course, I moved from a country where a 20 pounder was considered a colossal fish, and suddenly I was in a land where every bit of blue on the map had fish of that size, and if you were lucky, 40s, 50s, and possibly even bigger. First time I ever fished the Dutch Canal. I turned up and I tried to fish it English style. You know, I just had little 1.5 ounce leads, helicopter setup, little dinky, critically balanced rigs, and I decided to fish off this corner. It was like there was a harbour in on one side and there was like a concrete corner. Set up on it, plopped 2 rigs in, and I think they lasted about 10 minutes in the water before the ship came by, and it created a massive whirlpool around the front of the concrete, and the 2 lines just went together, and then the rod tips just kind of hooked over and they both fell off the rest, and I caught them both before they went in the water. And yeah, I guess from there it's been a steep learning curve. So as a foreigner, it's quite difficult to get into the scene to begin with over here. Now, of course, I spoke very little Dutch when I first turned up, and I'll be honest, I did get a cold shoulder from a lot of anglers in the beginning, but you know how it goes. You get to know a few people, they get to realise that you're actually all right, that kind of thing, and you get accepted into the scene slowly but surely. But that did take some time. And of course, in the beginning, you don't really hear a lot of information from them. You've kind of got to piece it together yourself, read between the lines, that kind of thing. But I was fine with that. I kind of enjoyed the adventure. I liked the idea that I could just leave the house and go around several lakes and not really know what was in them. So I did that first year. I just went around all the pits in my local city and I just watched and observed, and eventually found a few big fish myself. Of course, these fish had been fished for, so I wasn't pioneering anything, but to me it was just one big adventure, and I loved that. And now that I've been here for 3.5 years, I do know quite a few local anglers now, and the information flows a lot easier. You know, I've learned the language and that kind of thing, and that helps out massively. I'm also finding that I'm in a little bit of a position now where I can give a little bit of information back to the locals, you know. Sometimes I know things that they don't, and that helps as well, you know, of course. And it builds up a bit of camaraderie, so all comes good in the end.
Kieran Hopkinson. I mean, I know him as Curly, really, Curly Kieran, just primarily from Instagram, which, you know, that's the modern way, isn't it? You end up knowing a lot of people really through the internet these days as opposed to actually in person. Never met Curly, but every time I see a shot of him, he's always holding an amazing looking carp, and more often than not, it's one that I don't recognise, which again, in this day and age, is something that's really interesting. I always stops him in my tracks. You know, his shots are always laced with atmosphere, decrepit old woods in the background, you know, moody, exciting looking shots, like I say, that always stop me in my tracks. You know, I think Kieran's just, from what I can gather at least anyway, it's just a real lover of the outdoors as well. Exploration, just getting into places where there aren't too many other people. You know, last time I spoke to him, he'd just come back from a kind of Swedish Arctic hike or something like that. You know, I think they breed them tough in Scotland, don't they? And, you know, to end up as a sort of serious, committed carp angler coming from Scotland, you know, I think really that probably says it all.
We don't have anything like this in Scotland. End of. There's a bit of a canal that goes through Glasgow that's got some carp in it. But it's nothing on this scale, you know, it's like a third of the width, a third of the depth. Yeah, and there's not really a great deal of industry around it, you know, it's more just an urban stretch. Whereas this is something else. Way down there we've got these big barges coming in with the grain in the back, and they're craning it out onto the side and into the factories. and they're spilling that all down the sides of the vessels and into the water. Yeah, mate, this is just really typical the Netherlands, you know? Don't have anything like this anywhere in the UK. Well, it hasn't happened yet, but I do think that if it is going to happen, it's going to happen in the next hour or so. So let's just hang tight, and if it hasn't happened by noon, let's move on. Shall we have a coffee in the meantime? Not ideal, eh? Let's put it this way, canal fishing is hard. And you see these guys going over, you know, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you watch your content, right? You see these guys going over to Belgium and you know, they fish these generously stocked bits of canal that are maybe 1 or 2 kilometers long. It makes the location quite easy, whereas here, this is quite a big stretch, you know, it's wide, it's deep, it's long, and there's not many fish in it. There are a few special ones, you know, and that's the reason we're here. And of course, you can come over to Europe and carve up. There's venues in France, for example, that are quite generously stocked. I'm talking public waters here, you know, generously stocked with what Brits would consider big fish. You know, 30s, chance of a 40, maybe something a bit bigger. But yeah, here in the Netherlands, they're not as big. And of course, there are easy waters around here, but it's what you want at the end of the day. I'm not that interested in easy fishing. I want something special, you know? The lessons I learned fishing in Scotland are largely transferable. You know, the carp were smaller, but they're the same species at the end of the day, right? I had to do a bit of tinkering with rigs, just to make them a bit more well suited for bigger fish, that kind of thing. But end of the day, carp are carp, right? Now, there's a lot more of them out here, so in a way, I could say it's a little bit easier. You know, at least there's more choice of venues and that kind of thing. If you want to go for a bit of easier fishing, that is here on my doorstep now, and that didn't used to be a thing. And you've got to remember, in Scotland, we don't have anything like a linear or, I don't know, you know, any of these day ticket venues, you know, where you can turn up and almost be guaranteed 3 fish in a weekend, that kind of thing. We just don't have that. So it was always just really tough going. But over here that exists. Now, having said that, I haven't done a lot of that kind of fishing. I can be a little bit, shall we say, is masochistic the right word? I don't really enjoy easy fishing. I like to have a big challenge, and I like a target that's really going to like get me out of my comfort zone. So I've kind of stuck to that kind of style of fishing here regardless. I'm really pernickety about...
What does that even mean?
Pernickety? God, that's a good question, Joe. What a way to throw me. Pernickety is when you're quite critical about something, I guess. Maybe unnecessarily critical. But I'm quite unnecessarily critical about making sure the baiting needle goes like dead centre through the bait. I don't want anything to the side, so what I usually do is I'm putting them on the baiting needle and I twist them around to make sure the outer circumference isn't rising and falling as it kind of twists around the baiting needle. I guess it just helps with streamlining it for when you're casting.
Do you think you might have OCD?
Nah, definitely not. Have you seen the state of this brolly? It's literally just when it comes to rigs. I don't know what it is, just really pernickety about them, you know?
So does pernickety basically mean anal?
Yeah, that's, well, I didn't want to say for the camera. I am Joe. Easy boy. Sun's out, it's already hot. I had to take off all my layers now. Realistically, I think this afternoon's going to be a bit too hot for any fishing action, so I think we should up sticks, go and have a look around, maybe visit a few other waters, and let's maybe just take it easy tonight. Go and do some other things, meet up with the girlfriend, keep her sweet, and we'll reset and come back tomorrow, I guess, here or somewhere else. Yet to be decided. So I'm actually feeling quite confident about tonight. We've had a few fish in the swim already. Can't say with 100% confidence they were carp, but activity nonetheless. We visited a few different places today, including a days only lake not so far from here. We've been baiting a spot there for a few days. We went down and checked, all the bait was gone. So we've topped that up, we've come along here. We'll spend the night here, hopefully something comes in the early hours. But during the day, to be honest, it's a bit of a nightmare here. The boat traffic gets horrendous and it almost becomes impossible to keep the rods in the water at times. So as soon as that gets bad, we'll up sticks, we'll head back to that days only lake and hopefully we get a chance of a bite there. It's a noisy old morning this morning. All the people are coming by on their bikes on their way to work. We managed to get one in the night. Little common. It's not one of the big ones that swims in the stretch, but it's a bite and I'll take it. And we're going to get this wrapped up and then we'll head off to the day only lake. Well, he's cool, isn't he? Definitely one of the older ones. He's got quite a bit of character to him. Cool droopy dorsal on the back that's leaning back towards me here. And we're gonna have to be quick because the day's knocking on already and we want to get over to this day only venue. So let's slip him back and get wrapped up. That's me all dried off again. That might have looked a little bit silly, I guess, but it's just so much easier to swim a bucket of bait out rather than standing here with a spom rod. You know, you could be here half an hour to an hour, depending on how much bait you're putting out. But also with this spot, it's a little bit tricky. There's a massive log line through a crater, and if you're not careful, you could quite easily snarl up the rig down there, you know. Back in the spring, the water was a lot clearer, so you could actually just do it with a boat, you know, you'd come over the top, just lower it down, and you knew everything was safe. But now the water's not so clear anymore. There's a bit of algae growing. So yeah, you're going out there to put the bait out with the bucket, you may as well drop the rig as well, right? Plus, it's quite revitalising after a few stale days on the canal. So I was actually baiting like that when I had the big one. Back in the spring, I was swimming out a big bucket of hemp and tiger every single day. You know, and you could just go out, there was a lot of weed in the edge, you know, and you just swim out through the weed, you get to the opposite side of the weed and it would just drop away and there was that crater down below. So I'd just be going out, tipping that bucket upside down, you know, and it would be good for the night, you know. One time, I actually swam out there and the big one was near the spot. It was sitting up in the weed here, and I just came through, snorkeling away, and there was this colossal fish in front of me, you know. And I could identify it immediately, white tips on the tail, and it's just so much bigger than anything else in here, you know. And I got within about a metre of it. It clocked me, of course, and it just turned around and powered off, you know. And yeah, lo and behold, it was a few days later when I had it.
There seems to be a bit of a common theme in your angling, Curly, and that's having a knack for catching the second biggest carp in the country. Would you say that's fair?
I mean, it has now happened twice, yeah. Shall we say, I'm not 100% sure if it is the second biggest carp in the Netherlands. My feeling is it's the second biggest known fish here, certainly the second biggest that I know about. And now, sadly, that the black mirror's gone, it may well be the biggest. It was through pure coincidence that I happened to move within cycling distance of a lake. And I was going around it one day. I was with my cousin, actually, the cousin that got me into carp fishing in the beginning. He'd come over and we were walking around and we were up on a bit of high bank and we looked down and there was this colossal mirror carp there. I turned around and said to my cousin, "Mate, that's got to be a 60-pounder. He wasn't so sure. And after a while, talking to a few locals, I started to learn what was in there. It turned out this fish had just done 70 pound and it was growing. Now, I wasn't all that enthusiastic about fishing for it in the beginning. If I'm honest, a fish of that size felt a little, shall we say, it almost felt like a different species, you know? I didn't feel that confident that I could care for a fish like that on the bank, you know. I felt it almost required a completely different setup and you know, different tactics and techniques that I hadn't learned so far. So I kind of avoided it. There was plenty of other fishing in the region, so I went off and did other things for a few years, caught a few 40s, a few 50s, that kind of thing. But yeah, this last winter, I just got it in my head that I wanted to have a go for this fish. So I went back and ended up executing a surprisingly efficient campaign. I got there in the dead of winter. There was no other anglers around, so I more or less had the lake to myself. And I managed to get on these fish fairly quickly. And my fourth bite turned out to be the big one. Now, I wasn't ready to leave the lake because I knew there was a few other special fish in there. So I fished on for another month, and it wasn't through design. I was really targeting some of the other big ones in there, but I ended up catching that big one again, and it was probably just at that perfect time of the year, you know, on the lead up to spawning when she was at a really heavy weight. Yeah, she was big, man. She was really, really big. So the first time I caught her, I was alone, and a mate came down to do photos, but it took him quite a while to turn up. So I actually weighed the fish on my own, and I'm not 100% sure I did a very good job. First time I settled on a weight of 78 pounds. But actually that was the smallest weight I got off the scales. We were planning to reweigh, but we did some photos and I ended up releasing it before we put her back on the scale. So that was a bit of a mistake on my part. But that second time I caught her, there was 4 other anglers around. So we got her up, zeroed the scales properly and everything, hoisted her up, and we were really taken aback by the size of this fish. She went 39 kilos exactly, which is, in English money, 86 pounds. That's the heaviest this fish has ever gone, a top weight. Certainly for this region of the Netherlands, that is a record. And I believe that makes her the second biggest fish here in this country.
Yeah!
Oh my God!
Kieran, the big fish carp angler.
I can't keep it up any longer.
Come on, no complaining.
She wants to go, like. Oh my God, look at that. One of the biggest in the Netherlands, eh?
One of the biggest, man. For sure, it's top 5 fish. There she goes.
Yes! Well, it's been a bit stagnant here. Was a little bit of a risk coming here, to be honest. It's very low stock, and maybe catching one off the cuff like this was a little bit ambitious. We've had tufties going down on the spot all day, so I reckon that's probably why the spot's been cleared a bit the last few days. We have seen some fish mind, but they were very far off, and realistically we would need a boat to reach them, which we don't have. So, no way. Yes! Get in there! That's colossal, man. That is what we needed. I don't think I recognise it either. Wow, man. Well, I was just about to say to Joe, let's go, nothing's going to happen here. The rod has bust off, and that is an absolute cod in the net there. Oh my God. I do feel somewhat that the size of the carp here is ruining me a little bit. I told myself I would never let it happen, but I have noticed, I've caught myself a few times catching mid-20 carp, like leathery mirrors, this kind of thing in the night that don't have all that much character, and kind of rolling them around in the net and thinking, no, that's a nice one, but I don't need a photo, you know, just slipping it back, you know. And always afterwards I kind of kick myself, and it feels really strange to be doing that because, of course, in Scotland, fish of that size is massive, you know. I don't know, it's a funny situation to be in, you know. I've ended up buying tickets for other fish, 30 kilo plus. I found out where a few really big German carp reside as well, and I keep planning to go and have a go for these fish as well. But I really, really don't want to let it ruin me, because I've always loved carp fishing regardless of the size of the fish. It's just the fact that you're out there and soaking up the environment in general that I love, and I really, really want to hold on to that. Wow. That ain't a 40, mate. Oh my goodness. Kind of thinking mid-50s. Part of me wants to say a bit bigger, if I'm honest. Right, let's go. Whoops. Okay. Oh my God. What a beast. Absolute Leviathan. Ja, zeker. Ik moet hem terugzetten, maar where am I doing it? Just here. Oh my goodness. Look at that. Look at that beast. Wow. Oh yes! If I had to move back to Scotland tomorrow, I would 100% still be able to find carp fishing that lit my fire. I guess in that sense it's not really about the size. I would be equally happy fishing for a mystery in a place like Lowlands, you know, 17,500 acres of cold Scottish loch. Even if it was a 6-pounder that turned up, I would be over the moon about that. And I hope that never changes. I hope I'm always just as passionate about carp fishing as I am right now.
If you lost your hair, would you still be known as Curly Kieran?
Oh my God, don't even go there. If I lost my hair, I don't know what I'd do. I'd go for one of these hair transplants. I'm already going a bit bald on the top, and it's due to this filming that I'm starting to notice it more and more. You keep getting shots of me with my head down like this, Joe, and I'm noticing that I'm going pink up here. So I don't know, maybe I'm just gonna have to start wearing hats. I'll let it go bald on the top and just keep it on the side. I think that'd be a cool look, don't you think?